Good morning, good morning, good morning to all of you. Good morning to all of you on YouTube, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh. It is Sunday, April 2nd of 2023. I thought about doing an April Fool's joke on that one, but you guys are too sharp. I am Reverend Dr. Kate Walker. I use the she, her pronouns, and I am so honored and delighted to serve as the minister of this beloved community. And for those with visual disability, I am a 60-year-old white female with light brown hair and a pixie cut. I wear glasses, and I am wearing a purple dress with a religious stole. You are all welcome here. If you are here now live in person, if you are watching on YouTube at home or the coffee shop or wherever you may be, on the beach, maybe you're on the beach, or in the future at some point, we're delighted that you chose to spend your Sunday morning with us. We want to make sure that you all know that we are a multi-faith religious community. We are many beliefs, many origins, many sexualities, and many genders. And we are learning together. We are celebrating together, where questions are expected and answers multiply. If this is your very first time with us, you are extraordinarily welcome. We hope you want to be connected with us. If you're on the internet right now, after the service, not right now, go to our website, just Google First Unitarian of Pittsburgh, and down at the bottom of the website, you'll find a form to start receiving our newsletter. But we'd love to hear from you. Please send us an email of inquiry. And if you're here in person and it's your first time, there's a welcome desk right in the garden foyer outside those doors. And please, again, sign up, get connected. We want to know who you are, and we want to share in our journey with you. And if you're on the internet right now, you are welcome to join in on a wonderful social group that meets on Zoom after the service. You can send an email to firstunitarianpittsburgh@gmail.com. Just one word, First Unitarian Pittsburgh, and you'll get an automated response with the Zoom link. And for those who are here in person, we, of course, will have a social hour downstairs, right down those stairs or through down the elevator underneath this section of the building in the Undercroft. And there you will be greeted by the creative output of our wonderful art committee. They have a brand new exhibit that just went up and for you to view. There'll be a reception for it in 2 weeks. Where many of the artists and their families will be present. But please spend some extra time this morning enjoying it. It's such an important part of who we are as creative, self-sustaining, resilient people to be tapped into that part of our body and our spirit. And I also want to highlight that, our women here at First Unitarian Church, through the Women's Alliance in particular, but in lots of other ways, for over 150 years, our women have been doing extraordinary work in this community, particularly with children in hospitals. And that's been going on for so long. And so coming up on April 6th and May 4th, April 6th and May 4th, everyone is welcome. And they're going to be making pillowcases for the children at Children's Hospital. And apparently they go through 300 to 400 pillowcases a month that they, of course, have to then throw out. But the children, it brings so much joy into their lives. And instead of just having one of those scratchy white ones, they get this beautiful pillowcase. So April 6th, there's more information in the newsletter, or just give a call to one of the women from Women's Alliance, or Annie Stunden. Today, I am so delighted to welcome a beloved colleague and friend, Reverend Dr. Terasa Cooley. And you may have already been here, particularly because you think conflict is just the best thing ever, right? How many came because they just love conflict? All right, I think that was maybe 0.25%? Not even. But how many came because they know it can be transformational when it happens well? Yeah. So Reverend Teresa is going to give us some wonderful skills and lessons about how to do that, how to lean into it, and what to learn about it. She is currently serving as the interim minister at the Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena. She has over 30 years of experience serving community churches and congregational churches all across the country, including she worked for the Unitarian Universalist Association. She is a transformational conflict leadership and systems analyst expert, and I'm just delighted to have her here with us today. I invite you to settle in, take a deep breath, whether you're at home or here and just arrive in body and spirit. And I want to welcome Amaury. Thank you. Amaury Morales is giving Ellen a blessed day off, and we are just delighted to have you and your beautiful, beautiful music. I invite us now into our chalice lighting. If you wouldn't mind lighting our chalice, my friend. The symbol of our faith, our community, two circles holding us together with a flame, guiding us when we feel lost, confused, need inspiration. May this symbol be there for us, whether the day is bright or dark, whether the dawn or the dusk, midnight to noon. Let this symbol be there for us in our journeys throughout time. I invite you to stand as you're able in body and spirit for 128, for all that is our life.
Which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use, to build the common good, and make our own days glad.
I invite you to bring your voices together for a collective reading that is found in our order of service as well as within our hearts. We covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of our whole existence, of which we are a part, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in those in our institutions. Did you all see the story in yesterday that the Department of Health and Human Services in DC is investigating April Fool's Day as being potentially harmful and may need to be banned? I'm going to invite all of you who are able in body or spirit, either stand or raise your arm. Everybody, up, up, up. Either stand or raise your arm as you're able. Okay. Remain standing if you have ever felt foolish. I'm checking in the back. I'm looking at you guys back there. All right, everybody okay? Yep. Remain standing if you have ever played an April Fool's joke on somebody. Some of you are wondering if it was effective and did it count? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good, good, good. Remain standing if you have ever made a mistake. Oh, look at this. They're still up? They're still up? Yeah. I think we have a group of humanity in front of us. Okay. Remain standing if you've ever played an April Fool's joke on somebody and it went really badly. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Anybody who wants to have a confessional after church, I'm available. All right, go ahead and sit down. Yep. So it's hard, isn't it, when you feel foolish, make a mistake. It's particularly when you're trying to do an April Fool's joke and it goes badly. When I was a child, I think I was around 6 or 7, maybe 7 years old, I decided to play an April Fool's joke on my mother. Mistake number 1. First thing in the morning, mistake number 2. I put salt in her sugar bowl. Mistake number 3. My mother drank Earl Grey tea every morning before she could function. Do you see where this went wrong? Yeah, that was not funny for anybody in the household. But I had great fun with my college roommates. We put whipped cream on the doorknobs in the middle of the night in April Fools, things like that. We, switched things around in each other's bedrooms, and so you got confused about which room you were in, particularly late at night. It is partly of the human desire to have fun and to laugh at ourselves now and then, isn't it? Yeah. I told Reverend Teresa this morning, she was like, "Why are you laughing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm laughing at myself." She heard me laughing downstairs in the basement, and I came up and I said, "Yesterday I couldn't find the white cooler." And I asked my husband, I said, "Where's the white cooler?" And he said, "I don't know. I thought it was downstairs." And I said, "I can't find it." So he's such a sweetheart. I go off and do something else, and I come back, and he's already gone downstairs to find the white cooler for me, right? What a guy. What a guy. He says, "Kate, it's in front of your bike." I have 4 bikes. Okay. So I go downstairs, and I look in front of 3 of the bikes, no cooler. I look in front of his bike, no cooler. And then I look in front of the bike that I ride every single day. And there's the white cooler, where I had put it to put my laptop on top of it when I watch shows while I bike. Oh, man. Yeah. It's okay to feel foolish. Okay. Anybody feel okay feeling foolish? Yeah, some of them are working on it. Did you see that hesitancy? Yeah. So my message for all ages, throughout the ages, for time and numerical ages of all sides, it's okay to feel foolish. It's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. And perfection, frankly, is boring. Yeah? No, they didn't buy that last one, did they? No, I don't know about that one. All right. Let's sing our children off 414, yeah, as we leave this friendly place. Thank you.
As you leave this friendly place, Love give light to every face. May the kindness which you learn guide your lives till you return.
Our Share the Plate for this month is Ceasefire PA, and I'm just absolutely delighted that Josh Fleitman is here to tell us all about it. And then I'll talk through the particularities of how your generosity can be shared with them. Josh.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Reverend Kate, thank you to Evie and the Share the Plate team for inviting me to join you today. My name is Josh Fleitman. I am the Western Pennsylvania manager for Ceasefire PA. We are the Commonwealth's gun violence prevention organization. You have probably heard about a lot of national organizations that work on gun violence prevention, like Everytown and Giffords and Brady. And then there are lots of hyper-local groups here in our community in Pittsburgh and communities across the state and this country that are working on kind of community-based approaches. But really there was not, when we were founded about 20 years ago, an organization at the state level working to organize across the whole Commonwealth to drive policy change in Harrisburg for the most part. And so that's the role that we fill for the most part. We certainly get involved in local efforts to support local communities and occasionally get involved in national pushes, but really there's so much to be done in terms of policy change in Harrisburg. For some of you who may have the I'll say the misfortune of following closely state politics, it can be challenging sometimes. For a long time, it's been challenging in Harrisburg to really see movement on not just gun violence prevention, but a whole host of social justice issues that have clear policy solutions. And that's why I was driven to this work in gun violence. My background is in government and policy. I believe government's first and foremost role is to keep us safe. And seeing that people and families and children are not safe going to school, not safe going to the grocery store, not safe walking down the streets of our own community. And even if you've never personally been touched by gun violence, there's that ever-present fear that I think we all feel nowadays. Gun violence has fundamentally changed our society and us as individuals, where we are just feeling this constant anxiety of never being safe anywhere. And so a lot of the work that we do is trying to change the narrative from gun violence being a personal failure. You know, if you've committed a shooting or even been shot, it's because of something that you've done wrong in your life. And that really just could not be further from the truth. And that's a very dangerous, toxic narrative, as all of you know, probably know, oftentimes rooted either implicitly or explicitly in racist undertones. The truth is that gun violence is a policy failure. It is a failure of our government and decision makers to put in place life-saving policies that we know. We can look at other states that have stronger gun laws and we can see that they have less gun violence. It really is as simple as that. And so our belief is that if we can organize communities, build coalitions, hold lawmakers accountable, educate the public and educate decision makers, that we can build momentum and build power to put in place evidence-based solutions that we know will make it safer for our kids to go to school, safer for us to go to the grocery store, safer for our black and brown communities that bear the brunt of community-based homicides. I was looking at the statistics just recently, actually. Allegheny County's population is about 13% black, but 82% of the gun homicides in Allegheny County last year, the victims were black. And so it's a very concentrated epidemic that is rooted systemically in racism and poverty and underinvestment and disinvestment. But other types of gun violence, for example, gun suicide, which is actually the majority of gun deaths, affect a very different type of Pennsylvanian, mostly rural white men. And so we think if we can build broad, diverse coalitions that bring together these different groups of people who maybe see things very differently, but share this common tragedy and trauma of gun violence, that we can move lawmakers, that we can move the power structure, we can change the narrative, we can move everyday Pennsylvanians to make their voices heard and to demand change. And we're actually starting to see that work. I know that it can feel so doom and gloom. And I feel that too. Honestly, after the news of the Nashville shooting broke this week, I'm a little bit ashamed to admit I saw the news flash across my screen, and I'm embarrassed to say my first reaction was, okay, another school shooting, let me get back to what I was doing before. Because we have all grown so numb to this trauma. And that, I think, is the scariest part, to be honest. We cannot allow ourselves to grow numb. We cannot accept that this is the reality of the way things will be and will always be. It's not true. It was not this way. Every other advanced industrialized country in the world does not have this problem. It's a uniquely American problem driven by, again, systemic policy failures to make it harder for guns to get into the wrong hands. And so we believe that by marshaling the faith community especially, actually, I think you all play a really, really important role. And I was telling Evie that I'm especially fond of the UU tradition. I've spoken at a number of other UU churches. There's a mix of perspectives in this room. If you believe in a God that has created humanity, there is a moral imperative to step in and take action when God's creation is being wantonly destroyed by gun violence. If you are in the more humanist tradition, this constant infliction of trauma and pain and the constant loss of our neighbors, it really kind of tears at the fabric of what it means to be a human. We cannot have community and solidarity when so many of our fellow humans are being taken down and struck down by a preventable tragedy. And so certainly we very much appreciate your generosity in inviting us to share the plate with you all today. Just to give you a sense of what your donations will support, we're looking to expand our organizing staff, to build out a number of new organizers and communities, to be engaging with survivors and faith leaders and veterans and police officers and responsible gun owners and survivors and community groups to, again, build that coalition and build that critical mass. It'll help support the work we do to hold big events like what we did the week before last in Harrisburg. We took 450 Pennsylvanians to Harrisburg to lobby lawmakers, to have a rally on the front steps of the Capitol. And we're really excited because we now have a gun safety majority leading the State House of Representatives. We are able to have the first House Judiciary Committee hearing on gun violence prevention policy in a decade. And we had the room packed full of supporters of gun safety, and we expect that we will see more hearings in the coming weeks and then votes on these critical pieces of legislation. So yes, your financial support is extremely appreciated, but even beyond that, I hope you'll consider lending us your voice, because that is what I think is most fundamental to drive change. I know from not just looking at public opinion polling, but just my experience day to day, that the vast majority of Pennsylvanians support life-saving gun safety. The problem has been that a very small vocal minority has driven the conversation. So if you all can lend us your voice and speak out, you can go to ceasefirepa.org to join our movement. And I just cannot say thank you enough for sharing the plate with us, for giving us the opportunity to share some of our work with you. And I hope you'll join us in our work to end gun violence, because we can save lives with evidence-based policy, and we can build a movement to do that. So thank you again so much.
I invite your generosity. As always, your offerings will be shared 50-50 between the incredible mission work of this community, First Unitarian Church of Pittsburgh, and Ceasefire PA, that will continue through the month. You can, of course, make a generous check donation or cash through the offering plate, or mail it to the church. You can text. That information is in the order of service, but it's 412-435-1050. And follow the instructions, whether or not you want, and you can choose whether or not you want 100% go to Ceasefire PA or to the church. Otherwise, it will be shared 50-50. Thank you very much for your generosity. We come to that moment when we recognize that many of us have great weariness and brokenness in our hearts, that we carry sorrows and concerns and worries. And I just wanted to affirm for all of you that bear those. And I'm so glad you're here with one another, finding connection, finding support and resilience in your journey. And we also carry joys, celebrations, births, and spring, and the beauty all around us. This is the expansiveness of the human heart, that we can carry such depth of sorrow and joy at the same time. Today we are holding up a recovery of Joanne Wagstaff, who had a particularly bad fall a few weeks ago. She is home but faces long-term physical therapy, and she does welcome your cards at this time. And for all of you that are carrying joys and sorrows, please remember you do not journey alone. Please join me in a few moments of personal prayer and meditation and silence. Spirit of love, lift our hearts when we are weary. Help us mend when we feel broken. Guide us when we are lost or confused. Spirit of life, fill us with sustenance. Remind us of the beauty around us, even as we carry so much loss and pain. Spirit of justice, guide us in our words and deeds, to be kind to one another, but to go further and seek liberation for all, to remember all those living in the margins of life, oppressed. We particularly offer our heart and our prayers and our deepest commitment for our trans siblings right now who are under such ferocious persecution. May they know they are loved in their fullness of being, that they are creatures of creation. All who are feeling lost and lonely, please know that you are not alone. Let us be celebrating the beauty of life. Let us seek justice. Let us be one people with love for all. Blessed be Ashe. Amen. I'm going to tell you this now, and I'm going to tell you this again after Reverend Terasa speaks, that her workshop is open to anybody who wants to join us. It's in the Schweitzer room. There's a light lunch being offered for your reward, in addition to the fine wisdom that you will hear from her workshop. So if you really enjoy what she has to say, there's more. And she has a wonderful, wonderful book. She will be selling those during social hour downstairs, where you can buy a book, have it signed, tell her how much you love her. That's simple. Yeah. And the workshop will be when everybody's had a chance to get, their books and their coffee and their tea, and then we'll go up to the Schweitzer room and start that workshop. I'm guessing 12:15-ish. Yeah. The reading today from Victoria Safford, who is a Unitarian Universalist minister, has a wonderful book of her own from the UUA bookstore. The church exists in part to remember, to rescue from a vast silence the stories that might not otherwise be heard, to ask questions that might not elsewhere be asked, to celebrate victories and mourn losses that might otherwise be forgotten, to bless what might go unblessed. This remembering, this naming of truth, the consecration of stories forgotten, forbidden, and hidden, both terrible and beautiful, is the sacrament of the living world.
Good morning. It's lovely to be with you all, especially lovely to share the pulpit with my friend Kate, who's disappeared. There she is. Kate and I were colleagues in the DC area for 2 years, and it was wonderful to work with her. She helped guide the congregation that I was serving as an interim in their ministerial search process. And I don't know how much you know about the incredible work that Kate does denominationally. She serves our colleagues in numerable ways, and we appreciate all the support you give to her to do that. So I know that you've chosen a fabulous minister, right? I don't need to tell you that. So I congratulate you on your call, and it's great to be with you today. And Kate told me yesterday that this church was founded in 1820. So in that over 200 years, I bet you've weathered a few changes. And you know that you need to adapt and change over time. And the reality is that adaptation and change often bring conflict with them. Almost always bring conflict with them. Which brings me to my topic today, congregational turmoil. And I saw the hands that went up, and so, the majority of you understand that conflict can actually bring something good in its wake, but I imagine those of you who did not raise your hand are thinking, really? Really? Conflict can be a time of great learning? But those of you who did raise your hand can probably look back on those times of difficulty that you've gone through as a congregation and realize that you learned something really important during that process, however challenging it may have been. And today I hope to convince all of you that conflict is not something to be feared or avoided, but actually a source of growth and hope. I admit I came to this conclusion early in my career, for I'm one of those people who finds conflict to be kind of exciting when it is done well. When I was early in my ministerial training, one of the requirements that we had was to do a psychiatric evaluation. I'd never undergone such a process before, but the psychiatrist put me through a battery of tests, including the Rorschach test. Can anybody explain to me how the Rorschach test works? I mean, it's all bats and butterflies to me. I don't know. At any rate, he interpreted all of these tests, and he said to me, "You are so well suited for dealing with high levels of conflict. So you're really well suited for the ministry. I told a classmate about this, feeling kind of proud of myself, and she said, not everyone would think that that's a really good thing, Terasa. And indeed, not everyone would, because we all have different styles and ways of responding to conflict. Some of them are just about who we are. Some of them have been learned through positive or negative experiences. My own family is a case in point. My father's favorite thing to do was to say some provocative things just to rile me up. And my mother thought that any conversation that was the slightest bit heated was close to a sin, and she was constantly trying to say, "Can you speak quietly, please?" And my sister would just get up and leave the room. Many, if not most people, are indeed frightened of conflict and try to avoid it at any cost. And particularly in a congregation, people think that the last thing you should be doing in a church is having a conflict and disagreeing with someone. I remember years ago somebody saw on my resume that I was a specialist in conflict in congregations, and she said, "Really? There's conflict in congregations?" And I said, "Yeah, you don't know churches very well, do you?" In fact, conflict in congregations is inevitable, and if we think about it, we realize that church is where we go to think about and to explore our deepest values. And doing so is actually a very vulnerable thing to do, especially if we sense that our values may not be the same as others. And so when someone questions our values, it can almost feel like an attack on our person, because values are at the heart of who we are. And so, of course, there are going to be conflicts of this sort because of one simple fact: we are different from one another. We've had different experiences, we bring different histories, we come from different cultures, we have different personalities, and most of the time, that's a great thing, and we don't think about it as a problem. But it becomes a problem when those differences make someone incomprehensible to us, or when we think that our way is the best way to approach something and it's difficult for us to hear anything else. When those differences make us feel judged or misunderstood or not listened to, it can be painful, hurtful, or sometimes fearful. And part of what happens is that we bring different assumptions to the table. In fact, we bring different assumptions about just about everything. We are meaning-making machines. None of us experience the world in exactly the same way. For example, we can all mostly agree that this is a solid surface right here, unless you're a physicist who would say that nothing is really solid. But beyond that, there are a million different interpretations we can make about what this furniture is. We could say that it's brown because we celebrate nature and want things to look natural, or we could say that it's brown because we don't want something too colorful up here to interfere. Is it a pulpit that's up high because it signifies that the minister should be put above all others, or is it up high because it makes it easier for people to see? All kinds of different interpretations that we can bring simply about just one thing. And that's pretty innocuous, right? It's not something that's going to lead to arguments, but once we start, again, talking about things that we're deeply attached to, it can be really hard to see that we actually bring different assumptions to an issue. Wars have been waged over disagreements about assumptions. When someone comes at us with a conclusion that's entirely different from ours, we hang on to our conclusions for dear life without questioning how we got there. And think about an argument that you may have had because someone took a different position than you did. Kind of bring that to your mind. Someone disagreed with you about something and they came to a conclusion. You're like, how in the world do you think that? Did it help to actually keep saying your conclusion over and over again? Probably not. Probably not. In fact, bringing a rational argument to bear in an emotional situation almost never works. We've learned recently, right, in all of our big political disagreements, that facts simply don't always matter. They don't change people's mind. Because in situations of high conflict, our brains literally shut down. So I'm going to get into a little bit of brain science with you, so forgive me for a moment. But when people feel physically or even emotionally threatened to some high degree, what gets stimulated in our brain is the amygdala, or the brain stem. It's the thing that we have in common with every living thing. And so it's often called the lizard brain. And the amygdala sees a threat, and it has 3 responses: fight, flight, or flee. That's all it can kind of summon up. And the amygdala's purpose is to help you make very quick decisions in a crisis. And so it only offers you a few choices, and it only sees the world in very stark either-or terms. So think about it. If you're confronted with a snake on a trail that you're walking, right, that amygdala is going to start going crazy, and it doesn't want you to stand there and think, oh, look at the colors of that snake. Isn't that interesting? What kind of snake is that? Let me think about that. The amygdala is trying to say, it is time to do something now. And so that's why it responds. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but what happens is it cuts off access to the rest of your brain. You literally cannot think straight when your amygdala is being activated. So if you're expecting rationality from someone who's in that state, it simply isn't physically possible, let alone emotionally possible. So sometimes having that amygdala screaming at you is the right and rational thing, whether it's because we encounter a snake or someone is saying racist or sexist things. Our self-protective mechanisms serve a very important purpose. But when we are in that state, it does not allow us to have mutual learning. So if we can manage to calm that amygdala, then other parts of our brain can get engaged, particularly those that allow us to feel complex emotions. The other part of the brain that allows us to think in more creative ways. We are finally able to bond with one another in a different kind of way, to create connections, to develop empathy, rather than just to react. And when we can feel connected with one another, we're more able to tolerate difference. Interestingly, some of the very behaviors that help us soothe our amygdalas are what we do in church. Listening to music, engaging in rhythm, having time for quiet reflection. All of these are actually strategies for helping us recover from trauma. So then there's the neocortex, the part of the brain that allows us to think complex thoughts, to consider many possible ideas, to hold conflicting notions without feeling like we have to resolve them, that allows us to feel some curiosity, to be open to new learning. But again, if we're having that kind of reactive place going on in ourselves, we can't get there. And so it's our job to help bring the temperature down in any kind of situation where we see somebody being stimulated, because it's not just the amygdala that's going off. We have physical reactions, right? Your breath seems to speed up, or your breath slows down, or your gut clenches, any of those things that you can actually see when they're going on with other people. And so the time when that happens is not the time to say, let me tell you what you should think, right? This is the heart of the theory of conflict transformation. This is different from conflict resolution because, in my opinion, conflicts never get really neatly resolved in some kind of clean way that we think they should. It's also different from conflict mediation because it's not about people on each side simply trying to compromise their way out of a problem. Both of these approaches have their usage that can be important. But if we want to work our way through a conflict and keep our relationships intact, it requires a different kind of approach. Conflict transformation is about trying to let go of our assumptions and to get to a place where we can imagine something different together. It's about recognizing that conflict will always be present, but we can find dynamic and adaptive ways to respond to it rather than dysfunctional ways of reacting. I learned about this approach from a class that I took while I was doing my doctoral work. When I became a district executive serving congregations in the Massachusetts Bay Area, I promptly forgot about it. And unfortunately, at that time, there were 6 congregations in high levels of conflict. In one of them, I heard from people that ushers would greet newcomers at the door and say, "Welcome to our church. We hate our minister." True story. So I assumed, again, a very dangerous thing to do, that it was my job to go into these situations and help them resolve their issues and mediate their differences. And guess what? It didn't work. Sometimes I could kind of take some of the worst heat out of the system, but nothing really ever got resolved. Nothing ever really fixed it because they're not fixable. Finally, I remembered my training in conflict transformation, and so instead of engaging in well-meaning but essentially egotistical strategies of intervention, I tried a different approach. I started training congregational leadership in processes of healthy engagement with conflict, just as we're going to do this afternoon. And then it became their work to do. They owned it. And after a few years, very few congregations in the district had any high levels of conflict. Now, I can't take full credit for that, but I do know that congregations that embraced this approach became far healthier and more dynamic. I wish I could say that all of this work in this arena has helped me to behave perfectly all the time. Alas, not the case. But I have to say, the moments of my greatest growth have happened when I have set my convictions and my positions aside and opened myself up to truly listen and learn from others. I've had to learn the hard way that the point is not to be right all the time. The point is how to be effective in building relationships and solutions together. So there's a lot more I could say about this topic, but you can learn these things in the workshop. I hope I've introduced you to the possibility that you have not engaged in conflict because you're bad. It happens because you're humans doing what humans do. I know that there have probably been painful conflicts in this congregation, just as there have in every congregation that I have served. But I do believe that growth and learning can grow up even in the midst of great pain. It's not always possible to approach conflict with this hope. In fact, it often isn't the case, especially now when our partisan anxieties are completely ablaze. It's hard for me to imagine really being in a learning space right now with someone from the opposite side. But when I start to despair about that, I try to wind myself back down to the place where I live now. The community and the communities I work within here. If we can start to learn a different way of being, starting just with ourselves, when we allow ourselves to let this community enter into our hearts, to open ourselves to new possibilities, to relax our convictions, and open our minds to one another, we are on the way to building what can truly be called a faith community. And we can then be on our way to building a better world. May it be so.
I remind you, workshop, lunch, Schweitzer room. Yeah. Really, it's so much. And books during social hour downstairs. And for those of you who are on YouTube and are interested in the book, you can go to uua.org, find the bookstore, and her book is available through our denomination as well. I invite you now to stand as you're able in body or spirit. 325, Love Makes a Bridge. Our song leaders are going to do verses 1 and 2, and we will then do 3 through 5. Thanks.
Love makes a bridge from heart to heart and hand to hand. Love finds a way when laws are blind and freedom banned. Love breaks the walls of language, gender, class, and age. Love gives us wings to slip the bars of every cage. Love lifts the hopes that force the fear and beaten down. Love breaks the chains and gives us strength to stand the ground. Love rings the bells of Beltane and wedding day. Love guides the hands that promise more than words can say. Love makes a bridge that winds and may and not destroy. Love carries faith through life and death to endless joy.
I invite you to remain standing and bring your voices together as we extinguish our chalice. The words are found in our order of service and in our hearts. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth,
the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Do they sit or not?
They are.
Oh, they're sitting. Good. Excellent. I always have to check these things out in churches that are unfamiliar to me. Some sit, some stand, some hold hands. Anyway, so our benediction is from my colleague, the Reverend Alicia Ford. When we pause to remember who we are, companions on this grand experiment called life, when we take a moment to shed the ways that we have been carefully taught to lead from fear, to believe that we are separate, when we take a moment to shed all of that and hear our stories, hear and see each other into existence, into community, when we take a moment to embrace, to practice a different way of being, when we answer the call of love, then we are living into the promise of building the world that we dream about, seeking to be transformed even as we transform, becoming explorers and learners in this world around us, humbled by what we do not yet know, fulfilling the promise of healing a fragmented world, laboring not just in hope, but also in love. In this spirit we commit, in this spirit we pray. Amen.